Welcome back to Terror and Urban Myths. Before we get started, I wanted to remind all of you to subscribe to our show. And if you're enjoying the content so far, please take a second to give us a like. It really helps us out. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the vanished soldiers of Bang.
It's a story that has captivated people for decades, a tale of wartime disappearance. It seems to defy all logical explanation.
What really grabs me about this story is the historical context. We're talking about China in 1939, right in the middle of the Second Sino-Japanese War. The country is under immense pressure. The Japanese army is advancing, and every strategic point is being fiercely contested.
And that brings us to the Yangtze River Bridge, a vital access route that the Chinese were desperately trying to hold. To protect this bridge, Colonel Li Fu Sien deployed nearly 3,000 soldiers to the hills surrounding Nanjing. They were essentially a human barrier, tasked with repelling any potential Japanese advance.
It must have been an incredibly tense situation. Thousands of soldiers positioned in these hills. Communication would have been crucial to their survival. So when all contact with these soldiers was suddenly lost, it's understandable that panic set in.
Imagine the scene at headquarters. No radio responses, no signals, just an eerie silence emanating from the hills. The decision was made to send a second group to investigate, and what they found was truly unsettling.
The second group arrives at the encampment, and it's deserted. But there's no sign of a struggle, no indication of a hasty retreat, no blood, no bodies.
Their weapons are in position, ready to fire. Their supplies are untouched, as if they were about to have a meal. Everything points to normal activity, except for the one glaring fact. The soldiers themselves are nowhere to be found.
Nearly 3,000 soldiers just gone. It's almost impossible to comprehend.
Naturally, people began trying to explain the impossible. One of the first theories put forward was enemy capture. Could the Japanese have somehow managed to overpower and capture an entire battalion without anyone knowing?
That would have been a remarkable feat, especially considering the strategic importance of the location.
Exactly. And that theory was quickly debunked. The troops stationed on the opposite side of the bridge reported no unusual enemy activity. There was no evidence of a large-scale Japanese operation in the area.
So if it wasn't the Japanese, what about desertion? I mean, war is hell. Could it be that these soldiers simply decided to abandon their posts?
Desertion was certainly considered, but it doesn't really fit the evidence. For almost 3,000 soldiers to collectively desert at the same time, especially from such a strategically important location, would require a powerful motive. And there's no indication of what that motive might have been.
Plus, if they did desert, where did they go? Thousands of soldiers can't just disappear without a trace.
Precisely. The logistics of a mass desertion of that scale simply don't add up.
So we're left with this baffling mystery. A void where 3,000 soldiers once stood guard.
It's a case that seems to defy rational explanation. A stark reminder of the complexities of war and the enduring power of the unknown. But as we'll see, the story of the vanished soldiers of Bang is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
You're saying there are other stories like this?
Oh yes, many others. Across cultures and throughout history, there are tales of mass disappearances. Events that seem to defy all logic and explanation.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm suddenly feeling a lot less confident in my understanding of reality.
It's a natural reaction. When we encounter events that challenge our fundamental assumptions about the world, it forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge.
This is all a bit unsettling, to be honest.
I understand. But there's also something strangely compelling about these stories. They remind us that the world is still full of mystery and wonder. They invite us to embrace the unknown and to question everything we think we know.
I suppose you're right. There's a certain thrill in confronting the inexplicable. It's like staring into the abyss and feeling a strange mix of fear and fascination.
Exactly. And the deeper we dive into the story of the vanished soldiers of Bang, the deeper that abyss seems to become.
Well, before we plunge any further into that abyss, let's take a quick moment to remind our listeners to like and subscribe to our show. We'll be right back with more on terror and urban myths.
Welcome back to Terror and Urban Myths. Before we went to break, we were discussing the strange disappearance of nearly 3,000 Chinese soldiers during World War II. No trace of the men was ever found, and no compelling explanation has ever surfaced. But what makes this story especially intriguing is that it's not an isolated incident.
You mentioned that there are other stories like this, cases of mass disappearances that seem to defy all logic.
That's right. Throughout history and across cultures, we find tales of people vanishing without a trace. Sometimes it's individuals, other times it's entire groups. But the common thread is the lack of a clear explanation.
Do any of these other cases resemble the vanished soldiers of Bang?
Some bear striking similarities. For instance, during the First World War, an entire British battalion vanished during a battle in Gallipoli. The soldiers were last seen marching into a thick fog and were never seen again.
A fog-shrouded battlefield. It sounds like something out of a horror movie.
Indeed, and the parallels don't end there. In both cases, a large group of armed men disappears without a trace, leaving behind their equipment and no sign of a struggle.
It's almost as if they were simply erased from existence.
That's the unsettling feeling these stories evoke, a sense that the fabric of reality itself has somehow been disrupted.
But surely there must be some rational explanation. Could it be that these disappearances are the result of some natural phenomenon that we don't yet understand?
That's certainly a possibility. Some researchers have speculated that certain geological or atmospheric conditions could create temporary anomalies that might explain these events.
For example?
Imagine a localized magnetic anomaly powerful enough to disrupt radio communications and disorient individuals to the point where they wander off and become lost.
That's intriguing. But wouldn't there be some evidence of such an anomaly?
Not necessarily. These events are, by their very nature, transient and difficult to detect. It's possible that the conditions that caused them have long since dissipated, leaving behind no trace.
So we're left with speculation and conjecture. No hard evidence. Just a collection of chilling tales and unsettling possibilities.
That's the nature of these mysteries. They exist on the fringes of our understanding, challenging our assumptions about the world and forcing us to consider explanations that we might otherwise dismiss.
I suppose you're right. It's human nature to seek explanations, even when those explanations venture into the realm of the fantastical.
Exactly. And when faced with the truly inexplicable, our imaginations often fill in the blanks.
Speaking of fantastical explanations, I've heard some people suggest that alien abductions or interdimensional portals could be responsible for these mass disappearances.
Those theories are certainly out there, and while we can't definitively rule them out, it's important to remember that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
I agree. But it's hard to shake the feeling that something strange is at play here, something that defies our current understanding of the universe.
I think that's a healthy feeling to have. It's a reminder that we don't have all the answers, that there are still mysteries out there waiting to be explored.
Perhaps the real value of these stories isn't in finding definitive answers, but in the questions they raise. They force us to confront the limits of our knowledge, and to acknowledge that there's still so much we don't understand about the world around us.
I couldn't agree more. These mysteries serve as a powerful reminder of the vastness and complexity of the universe, and of our own limited perspective. They invite us to remain curious, to keep asking questions, and to never stop exploring the unknown.
Which brings us back to the vanished soldiers of Bang. What do we make of their story? Is it simply a historical anomaly, a footnote in the annals of war, or is it something more, a glimpse into a realm of existence that we can barely comprehend?
Perhaps it's a bit of both, a tragic event rooted in the horrors of war, but also a tantalizing hint of something beyond our grasp.
It's a story that stays with you, a reminder that the world is a stranger and more mysterious place than we often realize.
Precisely. And as we continue to explore the mysteries of the universe, we may find that the vanished soldiers of Bang are not so unique after all.
Well, before we get too lost in the labyrinth of the unknown, let's remind our listeners to like and subscribe to Terror and Urban Myths. We'll be right back after a quick break. Welcome back to Terror and Urban Myths. We've been talking about the unsettling disappearance of the vanished soldiers of Bang and exploring other similar incidents throughout history. It's a subject that really makes you question what we think we know about the world.
It certainly is a topic that highlights the boundaries of our understanding. We tend to believe in a world that operates according to predictable rules, but these cases suggest that there might be forces at play that we simply haven't grasped yet.
You mentioned earlier that the human mind naturally tries to find explanations, even when those explanations might venture into the fantastical. So what are some of the more unconventional theories that have been proposed to explain these disappearances?
Well, as we touched upon earlier, some people point to the possibility of extraterrestrial involvement. The idea that these missing individuals were somehow abducted by alien beings. Others propose the existence of interdimensional portals or rifts in the fabric of space-time, through which people might inadvertently vanish.
Those are certainly thought-provoking concepts, though I imagine it's difficult to find concrete evidence to support such theories.
Precisely. While these ideas might capture the imagination, they often lack the kind of empirical evidence that scientists demand. However, the absence of proof doesn't necessarily negate the possibility. It simply means we need to remain open to exploring different avenues of inquiry.
It seems like there's a fine line between healthy skepticism and outright dismissal when it comes to these unexplained phenomena.
Absolutely. It's important to approach these topics with a critical eye, but also with a sense of curiosity and a willingness to consider perspectives that might challenge our preconceived notions. After all, history is full of examples of ideas that were once dismissed as outlandish, but later proven to be true.
So where does this leave us with the mystery of the vanished soldiers of Bang? Do we simply accept that we may never know what happened to them? Or do we continue to search for answers, even if those answers lie in the realm of the extraordinary?
I think the search for answers is always worthwhile. Whether those answers lead us to a scientific breakthrough, a historical revelation, or simply a deeper appreciation for the mysteries of the universe, the pursuit of knowledge is in itself a valuable endeavor.
It's a reminder that we should never stop questioning, never stop exploring, and never stop challenging the limits of our understanding.
Exactly, and perhaps that's the most important takeaway from these stories. They serve as a call to embrace the unknown, to keep our minds open to the possibilities, and to recognize that the universe is far more vast and complex than we can possibly imagine.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground tonight, exploring the unsettling mystery of the vanished soldiers of Bang and delving into the wider world of unexplained disappearances. It's a subject that leaves us with more questions than answers, but perhaps that's the point.
Indeed. These mysteries invite us to contemplate the nature of reality, the limits of our perception, and the very fabric of existence itself. They remind us that there's still so much we don't know, and that the pursuit of knowledge is a never-ending journey.
On that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this episode of Terror and Urban Myths. And before we go, we want to encourage all of you listening to delve deeper into this topic if you're interested. There are countless books, articles, and documentaries out there that explore these mysteries in greater depth. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and give us a like if you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back soon with more explorations into the world of the strange and the unexplained. Until then, keep your minds open and stay curious.